Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the January 17th West Fargo City Commission meeting. I'd ask that everybody in the room please silence your cell phones. And I'd like to make an announcement, all that Commissioner Simmons will not be with us this evening. He's traveling out of state. If you would, please join me in a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. First order of business is to approve the order of the agenda. Are there any amendments?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Jurdevig. One moment, please. Yeah. All right. Thank you, Commissioner Jurdevig. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Olson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the agenda as distributed. It is in your packets and it is online. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item D is the approval of the minutes, January 3rd, 2022. They're on pages 3 through 4. They have been distributed. They are in the packet.
Make motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner George seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of January 3rd, 2022 as distributed. Is there any discussion? Excuse me. Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Item D is the approval of the minutes of January 3rd, 2022.
Building permits.
Building permits.
I just did that. What?
You just did the minutes.
My apologies to everyone. Building permits is item E, pages 5 through 6.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I got to check these off as I move along. Thank you, Commissioner Jurdevig. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Olson seconds. Been moved and seconded to accept the building permits report. It's in pages 5 through 6. We have planning and zoning. Aaron is here this evening if there's any questions. Any comments? Last year was a good year. Our commercial permits were over 70 million, or right at 69 million and change. We'll call it 70 million. That's the largest commercial permitting that West Fargo's ever experienced. So congratulations to all of those departments that processed that through. And another interesting thing, we had 277 single-family permits that were issued, and the value of those homes was 3 times bigger than what we did last year. So again, our community continues to grow at a very robust fashion, and so to all of those staff members that help move that along, we're grateful to the commissioners for your work. That's worth noting. So any other comments on building permits?
Need to vote.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. The next order of business is the consent agenda. The consent agenda consists of items A through H, pages starting on page 7 and ending on page 37.
I'd make a motion to approve, except for I think it's A through I. Is that?
H, the one I have on the screen, you are correct. The one I pulled up had only A through H. My apologies, I'll go to the hard copy. A through I. Thank you, Commissioner George, for that correction. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Jurdevig seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda, items A through I, and pages I is through page 38. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. First item on the regular agenda is the West Fargo Traffic Calming Study. Mr. Peterson, planner for the city of West Fargo, will be presenting. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Commission President and Commissioners. In March of last year, the West Fargo Planning and Zoning Department and the Fargo-Moorhead Metropolitan Council of Governments kicked off a traffic calming study of local residential streets, which the city had received repeated complaints about speeding vehicles on. The purpose of the study was to establish traffic calming strategies to address speeding and then to address safety on these streets by engaging residents, reviewing existing traffic conditions, and evaluating potential traffic calming implementation scenarios and cost estimates. The study was guided by a 9-member study review committee, which consisted of representation from multiple city departments. Luke Champa, the Associate Transportation Planner for MetroCog, is here tonight to do a brief presentation about the study and its findings. At the end of the presentation, we'll be asking for you to approve a resolution to approve the traffic calming study. Both myself as well as Aaron and Dustin will be available if you have any questions of staff after the presentation regarding the study. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Welcome, Mr. Champa.
Thank you, and thanks for having me, Mayor Dardis and Board of Commissioners. My name is Luke Champa. Thanks for the intro, Malachi. I will pull up my PowerPoint here. And I'll keep this very brief, so we'll go pretty quickly. As Malachi mentioned, we got this project in our planning work program, so it was included in our budget for 2021. Kicked it off in March, and we had a final draft report out to the public in December of last year. And I'm here today asking for approval of the study report. I'll go through a quick summary, hit the high notes of the report hopefully today, and then answer any questions that you might have about the report. So first off, what is traffic calming? And we do need to clarify this because we're talking about physical roadway features that alter driver behavior based on the design and physical nature of the roadway, what is called self-enforcing features, so the driver is forced to remain safe by reducing speed. What is not traffic calming? And this is a really important distinction. We are not considering speed limit signs and traffic control devices such as stop signs as traffic calming, because that requires outside enforcement from your police department, and as we know, resources are stretched thin. So we're talking about the physical design of the roadway as opposed to the speed limit. One example would be Beaton Drive, which recently, in the last few years, went from 30 miles per hour to 25 miles per hour based on resident complaints. Well, there is still a lot of speeding on Beaton Drive, even though it's posted with a lower speed limit. So for stop signs, we did get a lot of feedback about why don't we add more. Well, the engineering department uses the Manual of Unified Traffic Control Devices, which is the standard to technically evaluate where a stop sign can be placed safely. And so that is why we did locate a few locations for stop signs, but that manual also states that they should not be used to reduce speed. This is important for the city of West Fargo for a couple of reasons, and it relates to your 2 core transportation planning documents to forward livability and safety goals in your neighborhoods and on neighborhood streets. The 2 plans that I'll refer to today are Metropolitan Transportation Plan, Metro Grow, and your comprehensive plan, West Fargo 2.0. Safety, on page 7, this figure shows how as speeds increase, the chance of serious injury and death exponentially increase. So safety is a big component to this. And that is why we propose using traffic calming on residential streets, neighborhood streets. They're typically your local or collector roadways in the city, 25 miles per hour. And you shouldn't, they're mostly neighborhoods or residential areas, but you shouldn't exclude your walkable commercial areas if there is a problem. These can be retrofitted in those areas as well. Our study process, on this map, we looked at 6 priority locations. These were really the impetus for this study itself, a lot of resident feedback, as Malachi alluded to in the introduction. Almost every department that we talked to had received multiple complaints from one or more of these locations in red on this map. And we use this to develop community-wide and city-wide recommendations, but then in Appendix A, there are site-specific recommendations and cost estimates associated with each of the 6 priority locations. Our process included focused and strategic community engagement at 2 milestones of the plan. First, to identify the problem, and then the second round of engagement was to get feedback on the traffic calming options that we had developed. Existing conditions relates to the built environment, land use, and nearby destinations that may be contributing to speeding and safety. And then traffic conditions, we used a standard traffic engineering method to collect traffic data. The portable tube counters, you've probably seen them on the roadway before. And that collected speed, volume of traffic, and the classification. So it'll count the axles of vehicles to determine if it's a heavy truck, for instance. We also estimated cut-through with origin destination data, basically to determine a percentage of trips that they didn't have an origin or destination within the neighborhood, so they were just cutting through. And then crash data was very important as well to this study. Our SRC met 3 times at important milestones of the project and really drove this study to completion. Community engagement, we used direct mailing postcards, online surveys, email. We had an email subscription service. And then we did a lot of updates on our webpage as well as social media. And we held 3 pop-up events over the summer to meet people where they live. Our traffic calming measures in the report, there's 10 of them. These were narrowed down from a pretty robust list to be the most feasible based on budget, the effectiveness, maintenance, and other impacts. There's several pros and cons to each. And then the ability for implementation, especially as it pertains to snow removal. So each option in the report has a scale of cost, a scale of maintenance. The cost is obviously based off of cost estimates. The maintenance was directly from your city streets department to determine the level of maintenance for each option. And then the effectiveness is based on federal highway case studies of before and after construction of the option to determine the level of speed reduction that we might see. The 10 options include lane narrowing, curb extension, pinch point, chicane, median island, mini roundabout, speed hump, pavement material, diverter, and landscaping. And each page for each option looks similar to this with the plan view, examples. Some are from the local community, including West Fargo and Fargo, and the description, cost and maintenance, the effectiveness ribbon, and pros and cons. And I should note that Planning and Zoning Commission had a comment about mini roundabouts as being unpopular, and they've received a lot of feedback about that, and we did as well. And we included it, engineering wanted us to include some language in here about them being unsuccessful when they're retrofitted into the network. But the professional and technical opinion is to keep them as an option for now in the list of 10 items. But to realize that the city will likely need to figure out the design moving forward if they're to be implemented to operate much better. Local traffic calming examples start on page 32. There's several around West Fargo and Fargo, so there's a lot of good items here that have been built successfully. The evaluation matrix is just for future decision making to compare each option side by side with the different criteria that we utilized in that matrix. And then the overall or citywide plan recommendations are as follows. The highest priority is a traffic calming policy, which the city would develop and adopt a formal policy. That's the recommendation. Then the city would take the priority locations, those 6 locations, and bring those through that traffic calming policy. Same with the alternate locations. And then some of the reasons for speeding and safety concerns are related to the built environment, which goes all the way back to the development code when things were developed and the standards placed on lane widths and thinking about neighborhood streets a little differently in your development code will help proactively address for future developments. And refinement is a recommendation. So once the traffic calming policy is in place, there may be things that might not work very well, and you might want to tweak it a little bit. Same with this plan. There might be an option in here that will never be implemented, and you might want to remove it. So refining these over time to reflect what is working and what is not. And then the traffic calming program is the ultimate recommendation and goal of the plan, which is having the policy in place and bringing formal or citizen requests of safety and speeding and bringing them through a process by which you either set that aside or you bring it forward to a capital improvement programming process. And that's really the most important part of this plan is this. This is the draft traffic calming policy flow chart found on page 36, which is just a draft at this time, but we developed with engineering and planning departments very carefully. And the policy would be the formal written language that would outline each step as shown here. So I'll run through these really quickly. Step 1 is the traffic calming request, which the city has already received numerous requests for traffic calming, which is why this study is occurring. And step 2 is a technical evaluation, an objective technical evaluation. Two criteria are based on speed and one on safety. And then if no criteria are met, then you set that location aside and it shouldn't be reevaluated for at least 12 months. And then if it does meet one of the criteria, you as a city need to determine if the roadway is urbanized or developed. And if it's not, then you should likely wait to implement any traffic calming until the roadway is urbanized and developed to get it in one project, basically. If it is urbanized and developed, which most of your roadways are, then it can go to step 4, which is a public meeting and petition looking for a super majority or 80%. If that petition passes, it can go to your normal capital improvement programming process by which you fund capital improvements. If the petition fails, then it will go to the city engineer to reevaluate the technical criteria and make a professional determination as to whether that traffic calming issue is minor or severe. If it's minor, then it can be set aside and you shouldn't reevaluate that location again for 12 months. And if it's determined to be severe, the engineer can still forward it to the step 6, the capital improvement programming process. However, it may not be subject to special assessments at that point. Funding is going to be your typical sources you use for capital improvements, and as well as the Highway Safety Improvement Program, which is a federal funding source that is administered through NDDOT, and they administer that program and solicit for projects on an annual basis. What's unique about HSIP funding is that it is one of the few federal funding sources for transportation that you can utilize on your local neighborhood streets. So there's not a federal system requirement for those funds, so they're pretty flexible, and they do solicit those for every year. Resources on page 43. This is really something to monitor over time. These resources are updated from time to time and good for yourselves as well as the public to look into. And then we have our West Fargo traffic calming program contact listed as Dustin Scott here. He did not volunteer for that. I just put his name down. So, and then I just want to, before we move to questions and comments, I want to just reiterate that we are looking for an approval of the plan. It's not necessarily holding anyone's feet to the fire, but an approval of the recommendations to improve safety and speeding on neighborhood streets in West Fargo. So with that, I'll open it up for questions and comments. Thanks, Commissioners.
Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Ciampa? Commissioner George.
I guess a quick comment and a quick question. The mini roundabouts that you mentioned, so I live pretty near that one on 19th Avenue
Okay.
that you mentioned. It's not very popular in my neighborhood.
yeah.
So, yeah, so I just, like you said, I kind of stay away from those. Otherwise, everything else looks great. Otherwise, just wondered, at the end of the packet there was a letter written about Second Street East. And just wondered if there'd been any discussion on the letter that was received.
Yeah, I did respond to that individual via email to their concerns about our data collection method and then the priority of because we do list a priority of the 6 locations in the appendix. And part of me thinks that the priority is somewhat irrelevant because our recommendation is to bring all 6 of those through the traffic calming policy around the same time. So maybe the priority could be removed from that appendix. As far as traffic data collection, that we use the standard method of tube counters. So we went and deployed those during the week for at least 48 hours on weekdays to get a typical day. And so that's really the most standard and objective form we have of collecting data. And I tried to respond to them as such, so.
Thank you. Additional questions, commissioners?
Just a comment.
Please, Commissioner Olson.
This is just a plan, so whatever the recommendations are, we're not approving any certain type of traffic calming methods or anything at this point. We'll work with that later on with our engineering department, planning and zoning. This is just what your study concluded.
Yep, that's right.
Anyone else? Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
I have a question for engineering and planning and zoning. So do you have any reservations with any of the findings here? I realize that you were all participants in this. Any reservations whatsoever from staff?
I'll let you go first.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Mr. President Nordis, members of the commission. First of all, I do want to say thank you to Lucas and MetroCog. They did a fantastic job with this study. It's a very difficult subject matter to certainly appease everybody. No reservations. I do want to highlight that this is certainly a process that we are trying to develop, and that's what we want to have approved tonight. So to hit on Commissioner Olson's comments, we are not specifically looking at a project or one method here. More importantly, it's a process so that as staff, we can consistently evaluate needs as they come to us and have that process to fall back on, and certainly for the commission then to have a consistency in evaluating and making decisions as we move forward with individual requests. So,
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Mr. Peterson or Mr. Nelson, any comments about it?
Like Mr. Scott said, I think the most important portion of this study here is the flow chart that's at the very end, which kind of dictates what the process will be going forward on evaluating any requests that we get from the public. You know, anytime somebody calls to complain about speeding on their street, you know, they always believe that their street is the most important or, you know, the worst for speeding. This sort of gives us an objective tool set to evaluate traffic on that street, the speeding on that street, and, you know, kind of how dire the situation is or what the priority level should be when we go about trying to fix the problem to begin with. And so we didn't really have this before. Now we do. Going forward, you know, if you folks approve this tonight, we'll move forward with formalizing the process a little bit more, and that'll just help staff in the future when it comes to these types of things.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Commissioners, any additional questions? All right, they are looking for an actionable item from us, sir. So what's your pleasure?
Make motion to approve?
Commissioner Olson moves to approve. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Jurdevig seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the West Fargo traffic calming study as presented this evening by Mr. Champa from the FM Metro COG and Mr. Peterson from West Fargo Planning. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 2 on the regular agenda is a planned unit development, better known as a PUD, amendment for daycare expansion at 2360 7th Avenue East. Mr. Nelson, Director of Planning and Zoning, City of West Fargo.
Thank you, and good evening.
Good evening.
Item number 2, as you mentioned, is a plan unit development amendment request for a subject property located at 2360 7th Avenue East, which is just on the corner of 45th Street and 7th Street East here. The purpose of this application is to allow the conversion of an existing residential townhome unit into a daycare use, which would facilitate the expansion of an existing daycare facility within this building. The property is located within a planned unit development zoning district, which requires commission approval for any development changes within that PUD district. The applicant has provided a breakdown of proposed changes to the property, which is included within your meeting packet. The changes are all subject to standard zoning requirements, such as minimum parking standards, which would be reviewed for compliance at the time of building permitting. Ultimately, staff finds the proposed amendment complies with all applicable standards of review for the PUD amendment. At their January 11th meeting, the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval of the proposed amendment with the conditions noted in the staff report. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have for staff.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Commissioners, any questions? Commissioner Olson has a question.
I'm looking at the packet here, Aaron, on page 93. You're right there. The area identified as G, if you just scroll up to 92, says that additional parking will be in front. Is there already, if you look at the other photo from page 90, it looks like there's already a paved parking lot there. Is that just why is it looking different on those two different pages then?
Yeah, I know their intent is to provide some additional parking for the expansion of the daycare facility there. I believe there is some additional or some existing pavement to the north, and so I think they're noting where a majority of the parking will be located. I believe the main entrance to the daycare facility will be off the north is kind of my understanding there. Some of the additional modifications to the existing site is, you can see on the west end here, is existing playground facility that would be relocated to the east side to make way for some additional parking expansion. So they're kind of just rearranging how the parking layout works. And again, that would all be reviewed at the time of building permitting for compliance.
It looks so close to the existing building to the north there that I thought maybe they were
Yeah, and
overlapping.
I should note too that the applicant owns both properties, and so it's all kind of part of one facility, if you will.
Okay.
The nonprofit kind of has a number of different arms that utilize different spaces within these buildings, so.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional questions for Mr. Nelson? Your thoughts, please.
I'd make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner George. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Jurdevig seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the planned unit development for a daycare expansion at 2360 7th Avenue East as presented by Mr. Nelson this evening. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to item number 3 is a utility box public art project. Mr. Peterson, planner for the city of West Fargo.
Thank you, Mr. Commission President and Commissioners. So since last year's Color Fest event, staff has been in contact with the Arts Partnership of Fargo Moorhead about ways to bring more public art events and opportunities to the city of West Fargo. Because of this, staff were notified about the Blank Spaces program that the Arts Partnership has, which was first done by the city of Fargo in the spring of 2018. Essentially, what they did was the city of Fargo partnered with the Fargo Business Improvement District and the Fargo Downtown Community Partnership to bring local art on city-owned utility boxes on Broadway via printing art on vinyl adhesive wrappings. This type of public art is very popular in larger cities and is easy to replicate. As such, staff identified 4 locations in West Fargo that would be ideal for this type of project. 3 of the locations are located on the yards on Cheyenne, a downtown district, and 1 is across the street from the lights. The lifespan for art wrappings like this is about 5 to 7 years, with a total cost between $1,500 to $2,000 per project or per wrapping, depending on how large of a surface needs to be covered. Staff presented the proposed project to the Public Art Advisory Committee at their November 15th, 2021 meeting, and were directed by them to ask for $8,000 in economic development sales tax funding from the Economic Development Advisory Committee for the four projects. Staff presented the proposed project to EDAC at their December 9th, 2021 meeting, where the committee then recommended approval of that $8,000. Staff is here tonight to ask that the City Commission approve $8,000 in economic development sales tax funding as recommended by both the Public Art Advisory Committee and the Economic Development Advisory Committee. Like in the case of Colorfest, staff is proposing that this project be partially funded via private donations and state grants in addition to economic development sales tax as well. So as such, staff has proactively approached businesses within West Fargo for partial funding and has so far received $500 from Cargill and $500 from Onstead Twitchell for the purpose of the project. Should the commission vote to approve the project and the $8,000 expenditure tonight, staff will also submit a grant application for $1,250 to the North Dakota Council for the Arts tomorrow, prior to their midnight deadline tomorrow night. Funding from these grants and donations will be utilized first with city funding covering the difference. Any economic development sales tax funding not utilized will be returned back to the city. I'm available if you have any questions. And I should, I guess, point out, so this is sort of an example of what the projects look like. These are boxes that are in downtown Fargo. And then these are the locations which staff have identified for the four potential projects. So you have, this is actually a light control box. So this is just for, it's not for the traffic lights, this is just for the street lights downtown. This is a box over by Choice Bank. In fact, it's right in front of Choice Bank. So I've contacted some people over at Choice to see if they would be interested in donating some money for that particular box. This is a traffic light control box, which has the mechanical stuff in there to control the traffic lights at the intersection of Cheyenne and Main. And then this is the traffic light control box that's right across the street from the lights.
Commissioner George.
So you said you already have $1,000 worth of sponsorship, so would it be $8,000 less the $1,000 already that you'd be needing, or is it actually like $9,000?
No, it would be 8,000 less
Okay,
the
so we're
1,000.
already-
Yep, the only reason I put 8,000 down in this initial recommendation was because at the time I went to the planning committee, or the art committee and the EDAC committee, we hadn't received those donations yet, so that's why.
Okay, so we're already down to 7,000.
Correct, yep.
Okay. Just one other question about, I'm going to assume that 5 to 7 year life, like, they're not going to be you don't suspect there'll be peeling issues where they'll be coming off and looking ratty, or if that happens? Like,
I don't believe so. Right now, the main example I've been using is the ones that are downtown Fargo, and those were installed 2018 and then in 2019, so they've only been up a few years, and so far from what I've seen when I go downtown, I haven't seen those peeling off yet. But I guess it would depend on, weather, how much rain we get, that sort of thing, I guess I can't really give you a hard or straight fast
They
answer
should
on that.
hold up pretty well, though. I mean, obviously, I guess or you wouldn't be doing it, I suppose.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Additional questions? And you're going to continue to try and solicit private contributions as well?
Yep, correct. So Morgan Kastner, who worked up for the city up until about a couple of weeks ago, prior to her leaving, she sent out kind of an email blast, donation blast to people, and it was like right before the Christmas break, and that's where we got the 2 donations from Cargill and Onstead. I haven't followed up with any of those businesses yet, but once I kind of get your guys' blessing to go forward with it, I'm going to kind of go pound the ground and see what I can get.
And can you explain the process of approving the artwork, the art committee for the city of West Fargo, and maybe share with the public who's on that committee?
Yep, sure. So the art has been already curated by the Arts Partnership. So they have an online catalog of art from local artists. Most of it is abstract art. Some of it is, I don't know how to I'm not an artist myself. I don't know really how to describe it. Nothing controversial or anything of that nature. But how the art will be selected is based kind of on the amount of donations we get, and sort of the amount of the total dollar amount of donations. So for instance, say a business donates $2,000. That's basically the cost of an entire box. So as kind of a perk, as donating that amount, they'll be able to choose the art from that curated list, and they'll be able to choose the box that it goes on. If somebody donates $1,000, they'll be able to pick out kind of their top 3 options for art curated from that list. And then what we'll probably end up doing is some sort of an online poll through social media. I'll probably work with the marketing department on that, and we'll basically poll people to see, what people's wants are for those 3 options. If we don't get any $1,000 or $2,000 donations, what we're going to do then is the Public Art Advisory Committee will just pick their top 3 options from that curated list that's on that online catalog, and then we'll similarly do an online poll. That way we have some public feedback for the art that will be going up. Folks who are on that committee right now, we've got somebody who is an art professor over at MSUM who lives in West Fargo. We have somebody who does art therapy. We have a band teacher. And then we have 2 positions which are currently open on that committee. We received applications for those 2 positions, and I'll probably be coming before this commission again here in a couple of weeks with staff recommendations for appointments for those two positions.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Commissioners, additional questions? What's your pleasure?
I'd make a motion to approve.
Commissioner Jurdevig moves to approve the utility box public art project, and as per the recommendation of staff, with a cap from our participation of $8,000. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Olson seconds. Been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Moving on, regular agenda, item number 4 is a Metro-wide housing study. Mr. Aaron Nelson, Planning and Zoning Director for the City of West Fargo. It's in pages 104 to 131. Welcome back.
Thank you. So, as you mentioned, item 4 is a request to utilize economic development sales tax funds to cost participate in a joint metro-wide housing needs and a market assessment or market analysis. In terms of some quick background on the project itself, the Metropolitan Council of Governments, or MetroCog, is initiating this metro-wide housing study to be completed over the course of this year. The primary purpose of this study is to collect baseline data and assess local housing market in order to identify housing gaps, as well as potential short and long-term housing needs for the metro area. City staff sees a need for this type of information, which will help inform policy and decision-making relative to many of the development and housing-related goals of the West Fargo 2.0 Comprehensive Plan. The project will be managed by MetroCog staff through the contracting of a qualified professional consultant. A draft version of the request for proposals document is included in your packet for reference. The project is to be locally funded through joint contributions from the benefiting jurisdictions within the metro community, which basically make up the metro housing market, with a total project cost not to exceed $150,000. So staff is requesting the use of $16,000 in economic development sales tax for the City of West Fargo's contribution to this project. And so that's kind of a very high-level summary, and I'd be happy to answer any more detailed questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Questions, commissioners? How was it determined that our ask is 16,000 of the 150? And if that's a difficult question for you, then who's participating in the $150,000 expenditure?
Yeah, that's a good question. So a little bit of background on maybe how this project came to be. I believe the primary driver of this project is the City of Fargo, and their desire to have some of this information. The City of Fargo City Commission, I think, approved $120,000 towards the study. $20,000 of that would be to fund MetroCog staff, their staff hours in managing the project, and then $100,000 for the project itself. And so really the remainder is what's being funded by the other jurisdictions. And so I believe there's $5,000 coming from Cass County, as well as $5,000 from Clay County. The City of Moorhead, I think, is putting forward $15,000. And so it was just a matter of kind of who volunteered what and what the remainder was
Okay,
kind of-
Are the home builders involved in funding?
They are not involved in funding, is my understanding. I think early on, they also have a desire for this type of information.
Of course.
And so they were a proponent of kind of getting this project off the ground, if you will. But I think there were some concerns, they didn't want to have the appearance of trying to influence any of the results or anything like that. So they kind of backed off in terms of actual participation in the project itself.
So if I understand, it's the city of Moorhead, city of Fargo, city of West Fargo. Has Horace been asked to participate in this?
I cannot recall that off the top of my head. I don't want to.
And the two counties, Clay and Cass County. Yes, sir. Thank you, Commissioner Olson. All right, very good. I have no further questions. Commissioner George, please.
Just a quick comment. So a couple of months ago, I sat at a roundtable discussion meeting with the Home Builders Association. There were multiple individuals throughout the community, and we had a discussion on what a huge problem the housing market is right now. And this, and the desire to have this information is out there with so many people and organizations. So I think this is a study that needs to be done. It's important. So
Thank you, Commissioner. Anyone else? Thank you, Mr. Nelson.
Thank you.
Your pleasure.
I make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner George. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Mr. Jurdovich seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the Metro-wide housing study. Planning and Zoning Director Aaron Nelson presented, of which the city of West Fargo will contribute $16,000 to that study to be taken out of Economic Development Sales Tax Fund. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Item number 5 is a public hearing and approval of the West Fargo Public Library lease agreement. Mr. John Shockley, City Attorney, City of West Fargo.
Thank you, Mr. Commission President. Tonight, before the City Commission, we have 2 actions. The first is to hold a public hearing regarding a proposed lease between the West Fargo Public School District and the City of West Fargo on behalf of the West Fargo Public Library. By statute, when the library proposes to own, lease, or rent property, you need to hold a public hearing. The lease is in the packet. I can certainly answer any questions if members of the public were to have questions about the lease, but in summary, it is very similar to the past lease, the past 5-year lease on the premises. It is a year-to-year lease, so it gives the library options if there's going to be construction of a library in the future, just gives the library options. It is good for a term of 5 years, so each year it just renews. And then I think probably of most importance is the actual annual amount of the rent went down just slightly. You'll see in the original lease of dated 2017, it was an annual rent of $143,880, and now it's an annual rent of $120,390. And so you'd need to hold a public hearing, and then after the public hearing, vote on the lease. And the library board unanimously approved the lease. And the library director would normally present it, but currently there's nobody in that position, so I'm pinch hitting from.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Questions for Mr. Shockley on the lease agreement? Hearing none, we'll close the regular agenda and we'll move into a public hearing. This is a public hearing with regard to the approval of the West Fargo Public Library lease agreement as presented by Mr. Shockley for a 5-year term. Each year is reviewable by parties. Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak to this issue? Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak to this issue? Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak to this issue? Hearing no public comment, the public hearing is closed. We move back to the regular agenda. Commissioners, your thoughts on the presentation by Mr. Shockley?
Make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner George. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Jurdovic seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the West Fargo Public Library lease agreement with the West Fargo School District as presented this evening. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Item number 6 is the first reading of ordinance number 1205, an authorization of annual appropriation bonds. Mr. Shockley, City Attorney, West Fargo, is presenting. Mr. Shockley.
Thank you, Mr. Commission President. Before the City Commission is an ordinance that would authorize the City Commission to issue annual appropriations bonds. Just for the record and for the public's information, this isn't, the city's actually not issuing any debt. This is just an ordinance that would give you that authority to go ahead and issue it. What an annual appropriations bond is it's a bond that is, in the state of North Dakota just recently issued one very similar with the legacy bonding. Every year, the City Commission would have to appropriate funds to make the debt service on the bonds. And so this ordinance just authorizes the City Commission to issue annual appropriations bonds. This is one of the bonding programs that is being contemplated for financing the fire station. And so as the first step, we have to have the ordinance in place to allow the City Commission to make that decision in the future. I did want to note that on the second page, and this is once again just for information, this is authority that's in addition to the other types of bonds the city can already issue, like revenue bonds, geo bonds. So this is just an additional tool in your toolbox. But there's no debt being issued tonight. This is just a first reading, giving you that authority to do it.
Thank you, sir. Questions for Mr. Shockley? All right. This is the first reading, and this is an actionable item. We're looking for approval of that authorization.
I'd make a motion to approve the first reading.
Thank you, Commissioner Jurdovic. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Olson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the first reading of ordinance number 1205, an authorization of annual appropriations bonds as presented by Mr. Shockley, City Attorney, City of West Fargo. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Item number 7 on our regular agenda is the second reading of changes to Chapter 12, Ordinance 1203. Mr. Shockley, City Attorney, City of West Fargo.
Thank you, Mr. Commission President. This is a second reading of Ordinance 1203, which is relating to enacting the T21 requirements for the sale of tobacco, prohibiting the sale of tobacco for persons under 21, and then creating a section relating to the possession, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce the drug, but it's bringing us into conformance with state law, as is the other sections. And so no changes between the first and second reading. Can certainly answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Questions for Mr. Shockley? Commissioners?
Make the motion to approve second reading.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the second reading of changes to Chapter 12, Ordinance 1203, as presented by Mr. Shockley this evening. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item number 8 is the City Administrator's Report. Mrs. Tina
Good evening.
Fisk.
Yes, sorry. Good evening, Commission President and Commissioners. I just have a few quick items. At the last meeting on January 3rd, there was an item tabled that was in relation to a resident that had a question on a revision for an ordinance. That individual is not able to attend a meeting until maybe sometime in February, and so we're just going to keep that tabled until we can get the individual in here to explain
Does that
what
meet
their
with the-
thoughts were.
Excuse me, does that meet with the approval of the commission?
Yes.
I'll just ask for consensus. Thank you.
Yep. The other item is the North Dakota Opportunity Fund Loan Committee and Steering Committee. There was, members of the Economic Development Department were on that committee. And now that we're restructuring, we took a look at it and felt that it was more of a position that belonged in the commissioner portfolio area. And so Commission President Dardis has offered to serve on that board if you would like to appoint him to that.
Make motion to.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson.
Second.
Is there a second, please? Second. It's been moved and second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Just remember, there's appointments coming up.
I know. I got Cass County Planning again. So.
Another item, I had sent out to you the massage ordinance that was recently approved by the city of West Fargo, or by the city of Fargo, I'm sorry, excuse me. Generally, we use Cass County Public Health, which is Fargo Cass Health. Our taxes that citizens pay into the county help fund our portion of the work that they do for us. Usually, when it comes to health licensing and things like that, we follow their direction, as they're the ones that have to enforce the rules and regulations. So I just sent that out to you so that you could kind of get an idea of what it is. And then I wanted to ask you if I could direct Mr. Shockley to prepare that ordinance for the city of West Fargo and then bring it forward to you guys for review.
Sounds good to me.
Commissioners, your thoughts? Again, we have a consensus by head nod. Commissioner George, maybe not? Okay, then we're going to step back. Commissioner George.
My problem with that one is it has to do with licensed massage therapists when it's unlicensed massage therapists where I think it needs to be more directed. I know that's not what Fargo passed, but that's my personal opinion, being my significant other is a licensed massage therapist, and it affects him directly. And so that was his concerns, as well as the other licensed massage therapist in his industry, was that he just felt like it was more of an undue burden and maybe some privacy issues with clients and whatnot. So those were his concerns when, obviously, you know, the industry, myself, I'm sure everybody wants to do everything we can to prevent, you know, trafficking. It's horrible, but, you know, truly the unlicensed is where we believe the focus should be. So that's our problem with that ordinance.
Okay, so that being said, we can do this one of two ways. We can have a straight up and vote up and down as per the recommendation of Mrs. Fisk, or we can encourage you, Commissioner George, to bring that individual forward to have some discussions with the pertinent people. Commissioners, it's up to you. Your thoughts, please. Or a motion.
Don't have much time to think about it.
Maybe it might.
We can certainly table this if
Yeah, being
if
it's
that's
not in the
pleasure.
packet, it might be hard.
You know, this is at our discretion, so if that's the avenue we'd like to take, let's.
I'd like to know more info.
Yeah, a
Okay.
little more info on it.
Would so you would like to table it and then possibly Commissioner George and I can sit down with John and go through the ordinance and just kind of hit the points of concern and come back another time?
I'd like a motion to table, please, and with that verbiage on it.
I will make a motion to table with exactly what Tina said.
Thank you, Commissioner Jurdovic. Is there a second, please? Second. Thank you, Commissioner George. Seconds. She was going to say it. I was. She's an advocate for this, so we'll give her the second on it.
Give her the-
So it's been moved and seconded to table this until further discussion can be, and information can be brought forward. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Anything else additional, Mrs.
The
Fisk?
last item I have for you is just a reminder that our February 21st meeting was moved to the 22nd due to a holiday. We will remind you of that again next meeting, but I just kind of want to clarify that because it was on consent, just in case it was missed. So that is all I have.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisk. Do any of you have anything for Mrs. Fisk? All right. Are there any non-agenda items that any of you commissioners would like to bring forward? Hearing none, is there anything that any of our department heads would like to bring forward as a non-agenda item this evening? Or staff, not only the department heads, or staff? Okay, hearing none. Next order of business is Commissioner Jurdevik.
Oh, I have to fill in for,
Yes, yeah.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I just happened to look that way first, so we have a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? Second. Commissioner Olson seconds. We are adjourned. Thank you.